So, welcome everybody. Let me just let you know right off the bat, there are donuts in the back, Cohesity donuts. If you don't have one, feel free to grab one. Unless, of course, you've already done your cheat for the day, like I have. So can't eat it. Hello, my name is Marlon McFate. I am the CTO and CISO at Cohesity. And today we're going to be talking about utilizing AI to unlock some very interesting things within our organizations. First, though, I'd like to just make an announcement that we're very proud that we brought on Dr. Craig Martell. If you're not familiar, he is the former director for CAO. And actually, the paper here to the right, you can find it online. He basically wrote the Department of Defense's ideas on how they're going to start to adopt things like AI, right? And Dr. Craig Martell came on to our company. He has kind of an opinion how AI should be implemented, or at least kind of the road path of maturity from beginning to end. And those three things kind of start with data, and I think we kind of all know that, a lot of data, well-tagged, well-organized data, which is kind of difficult in the world of unstructured data, but we can find ways to do it. That kind of moves to analytics, and eventually we can start utilizing that and implementing it into AI. And we're going to kind of show you how we've done that. So, sorry. Augusta's very hot, and I am a little dehydrated, so I'm going to be drinking some water. I apologize. All right, so if you're not familiar with Cohesity, Cohesity's been around for 11, 12 years now. And we started off as a data protection company, right? That's kind of where we began. And the idea was to get to where we are today and beyond, right? But we needed to do a couple of things to begin with. And that was first kind of redo the data protection world, right? The data protection world, this bottom layer you see here, the foundational layer, in the more traditional way or legacy way of doing things is very complicated. It has a lot of moving parts. You have to implement and bolt on different things if you want to do things like security or ransomware detection or virus detection. So we wanted to actually have a holistic platform approach to being able to do all those things, and that's foundational. What we're going to be talking about today, though, are these layers above that. So if all you have is a data protection infrastructure and you've matured to the point where you can handle security incidents and stuff like that, you're doing pretty well, but what you're left with is a very expensive infrastructure that really you're getting almost no value out of. If you think about it, it's just sitting there and it's waiting for a rainy day or something tragic to happen so that you can recover from it, right? The way we look at it is it's an enormous amount of data, right? Regardless of where it actually is, if it's in the cloud, in multi-cloud, if it's on-prem, if it's at the edge, it's an enormous amount of data, right? And we call that secondary data, right? But secondary is kind of a misnomer to a certain degree because within that secondary data, you represented all pretty much, if you're doing it correctly, your primary data through backups, through replication, through backing up virtual machines, databases, unstructured data. Pretty much that secondary data lake, if you will, represents pretty much an entire organization's data. Not just the primary, the last 30 to 60 days, but then everything in kind of perpetuity depending on how long an organization retains data. So there's an enormous amount of data in there, and there's a lot of value to be gained from that is the way that we look at it, right? So foundational data protection, but we're not going to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about the layers above that allow us now to take that very expensive infrastructure in the past and be able to derive immense amounts of value out of it. Okay, so you may have heard the name Gaia. It's our latest AI offering, I'll say that, because we actually have been doing AI the entire time that we've been around as a company, right? AI is not really a new thing, okay? And let's also be clear, there's different types of AI, and we'll be talking about a couple of these in what Gaia is made up of. But I mean, these are different types of AI. Like speech recognition has been around forever. Granted, it wasn't very good when I tried to use it the first time, back in 1999 or 2000 or something like that. It didn't even nearly write the email I was trying to speak, right? Today we're going to focus, what Gaia is kind of built on is deep learning, some neural networking, and natural language processing, all right? But before we go there, I want to take a step back. How many people here have been hearing generative AI in here, and our product has generative AI. Anyone? Okay, yeah. So it's kind of the new buzzword to a certain degree. It's kind of zero trust was the last one, I think, right? It meant a lot of things, and it can mean a lot of things. The difficulty here, though, is, and this does contain generative AI, but using generative AI kind of just on its own is a scary proposition if you really think about it, because it has some drawbacks. Generative AI is a creative tool, right? But we want to use it to do things that require extreme precision. You could be, dancing on a tightrope with no net if you kind of go about it that way. I think we've all heard the stories of the lawyers that wrote the brief and then got, disbarred by in their state because it did a bunch of lies. But some of the things that are wrong. One is generative AI, or the large language model, is really only good up to the point that it was trained. And that's why we have 3.5, like just using ChatGPT as an example, 3.5 and then 4, right? And if you're using the free version, sometimes you'll get that message like, I wasn't trained beyond this point, right? The other things with generative AI is that hallucinations is what they call them. That's kind of what happened to the lawyers, right? Not only is it a hallucination, not only is it completely made up, but the ChatGPT in this particular example, or in all those examples, does it with incredible confidence. Right? It's like, this is the answer, right? It made quotations for case law in that example, right? And then the last one here is, it doesn't tell you where it got its information. If you read some of the responses, these are real responses. One of them says, I apologize, I don't actually have access to the material I was trained on. So if you understand how training happens in machine learning, you'll understand, yeah, it doesn't have access to the actual data. So it doesn't tell you where it's from. It can't tell you how it came to that, to its conclusion. And a good example of this, I went online and I used ChatGPT 4.0 and I asked it, how many moons does Jupiter have? And the first answer it came back with was it has 69, I think was the number, 68 or something like that. And then I said, okay, redo your calculations, but only use data from NASA. And it said, okay, now it has like 72 moons. Now the correct answer is like 140 something moons, right? So it's way off, right? So this is a good example of all three of those problems. One is it doesn't know the answer because maybe it wasn't trained up to a point where we actually found all those moons, but we're finding them on a regular basis now. I guess anything, a large rock kind of qualifies at this point. It can't tell me where it got the information from. I said NASA, but it can't tell me whether or not that just means the source had NASA in the name or NASA on the page, right? I don't get any supporting information. So this is where a technology called retrieval augmented generation comes from, a RAG, which, it's a horrible, nickname for it, but that's what it is. We don't get to name it again. So what RAG allows you to do in a situation is take additional data and present it to a large language or generative AI system and kind of augment its intelligence or the amount of information that it knows, right? So in this example, if I'm asking that same question, what is Cohesity Gaia? And I have provided basically, let's say, all the documentation from my company about what Gaia is, it'll first go to ChatGPT or the generative AI model and say, do you know what Gaia is? And it'll say, well, no, I don't. Let's go ask RAG. And RAG, if it has that information, will pass back, well, yes, actually, I do know what Cohesity Gaia is. Here's the relevant information. Let me summarize that for you. Oh, and by the way, let me also give you links to all of the artifacts that I use to generate that answer. So you now, as the human being, can go back and say, where did you come up with, what Cohesity Gaia is, right? And I can really essentially do this with any data. And remember, that data, secondary data like we were talking about, an immense amount of data. We have organizations that have, literally in perpetuity, all of their data stored in some way, shape, or form in that secondary data, going back, years and years, if not decades, all of that information in there. Imagine I was talking to a customer and they were doing researching a legal problem, right? And they were like, did this ever happen, or did this information ever leave the company? Was it ever communicated to someone, outside of the organization? They had all their emails, they had all of their documents, they had all their attachments, and you can just go into Cohesity and Gaia and say, has this information ever been emailed outside of the company? And not only did it say yes, it found the documents that it was contained in, it found the emails that were used to send it with all of the senders on the list, and you can have a conversation with that data. Somebody could say, well, remove any results that have John in them, because John's allowed to know because he's our attorney or something along those lines. And it'll completely redo the information and provide it back to you with all of the supporting documentation. So what is the benefits of this? Well, one, anyone taking a look at how much it costs to train a large language model? It's really expensive, and it takes an incredible amount of horsepower. So you don't have to continually retrain a model with new data. You can present the data to the model and have it supplement its knowledge. The answers are always up to date, or at least as up to date as the information that you provide to it, not necessarily just the last time that model was trained. They'll be more accurate. You'll eliminate completely, if not most, hallucinations. I'm sure you can get it to hallucinate, if you try really, really hard. No training required, like I said, and it acknowledges uncertainty when it doesn't have the answer. It doesn't try to make up an answer for you. It'll say, I don't have any information, pertaining to that. All right. So what did we do? We took our knowledge of AI in these other areas, sorry, I'll skip that one, in these other areas where we're utilizing AI, and we have been for a long time, like the speech recognition, natural language processing, but we have both operational and mission type AIs. We have everything from operational, like capacity planning, capacity prediction, and then other ones like data entropy, right, which is really useful when it comes to cyber incidences, ransomware detection, data classification. Where is my sensitive data? More importantly, if I do have a problem and I end up suffering a breach, what data was on the things that were breached? What sensitive data actually existed in that? So we've been using this for a long time, and Cohesive Gaia, like I said, is really just the latest addition to our AI family. And it works just as simple as we just kind of laid it out for you, right? You ask a question to Cohesive Gaia. Cohesive Gaia does utilize a generative AI and a large language model, currently ChatGPT, but our intentions here in the very near future, like months, is to allow organizations to say, no, I want to use a different large language model, or I want to train my own. That will happen. So it's really bring your own model to this, right? And we're also having this work basically in a dark site. So, by early next year, organizations that want to use this in completely air-gapped environments will also be able to do that. Of course, there will be a hardware requirement, of course. It is AI, right? But we oftentimes get this, okay, so you did that, that's very interesting, but I still see organizations that are trying to kind of do this on their own, right? And usually, I think that the last statistic I saw was something like 72% of AI initiatives fail. And it usually fails for a couple of reasons. One is before we start, we didn't realize the knowledge base or the skills that a person needs to be able to kind of implement it. Then there's, as you see here on the top, there's a lot of different pieces that have to be put together. I have to have the data. I have to figure out a way to classify and index that data. I have to put it into a vector database. I have to provide it to something that can perform RAG, and then I have to be able to provide that to a large language model. There's a lot of steps in here. So we've already done that hard work for you, right? Because of the protection side of things, we also have all that data. So going back to what Craig Martell said at the beginning, you have to have the data, you have to be able to provide analytics to it, and then you can move to AI. So we've kind of covered all of those steps. So the benefits here, this is kind of an eye chart, and in the interest of time, I'll just kind of focus on one I think that's really important, is no extra copies of data. So a lot of the other solutions that are talking about utilizing generative AI, the first step in that is typically I have to take my data and copy it somewhere so that they can do generative AI to that. The data is already inside of the data protection solution. It doesn't need to move. It can be indexed in place and then utilized in place through this. So we're not taking our data and handing it and giving it to a third party. And with that, I think we are, we're a couple of minutes. I'll take some questions. I'll just leave this up here. the one thing I will say about this slide is they're all kind of hexagons here. I imagine this is going to turn into a honeycomb slide in the next couple of years, because we're continually, when we work with customers to talk about this, and they understand their mission space, and we give examples of what we can do, like in the Intel community, in the cyber community, in law enforcement, and those types of things, they come back to us and they say, oh my God, if you can do that, we can do this. So this is really kind of your imagination is the limit in how you can utilize this technology. So putting together both those concepts and the amount of data that we have, both in primary and secondary data, it really is. You can do almost anything with this, from investigations to intel analysis, bringing teams together. There's just so much. So I imagine this is going to grow considerably over the next year. With that, anyone have any questions?
What's your subscription models, right? It's they're good for only for enterprise, or for individual enterprise, or government? How you would do it?
So I will say, booth 215 might be a better question for that. I'm not necessarily a sales guy, but we do have account teams here that could probably answer that. We are doing it in a subscription model. It's an amount of data, not amount of users. Just to give you the kind of quick and dirty answer, it's not based on a number of users. It's how many queries and how much data is really the licensing model. And there's models for both currently 3.5 and 4. Like I said, in the future there'll be the bring your own model version in the subscription model. Did I answer the question? Okay. Anyone else? All right, so with that, like I said, booth 215, please come by. Let's chat, ask me questions, meet the rest of the team, have some donuts, because I'm not bringing that many donuts back home.